Question 1. Your supervisor tells you to collect data on out-of-seat behavior. Which of the following would be the most objective and measurable definition? A. When the client is disruptive while not sitting down. B. Any instance where the client's bottom is not touching the chair while they are expected to be seated. C. When the client seems restless and gets out of their seat. D. When the client is out of their seat and bothering others. Answer: B. Any instance where the client's bottom is not touching the chair while they are expected to be seated. This question tests your ability to choose a good, objective behavioral definition. Tricky part is that options C and D include subjective words like disruptive, seems restless, and bothering others, which aren't clearly observable or measurable by everyone the same way. An objective definition describes exactly what the behavior looks like or sounds like, using words that anyone observing would agree on. Option B clearly describes the physical action. Bottom is not touching the chair, and specifies the context, expected to be seated. This leaves no room for interpretation about whether the behavior happened. Remember, a good definition passes the dead man's test. A dead man can't do it, and is something you can see or hear and count or time. Question 2. A client typically screams when you present a difficult academic task. The screaming usually results in you removing the task for a few minutes. What is the likely function of the screaming behavior in this scenario? A. Attention. B. Access to tangibles. C. Automatic reinforcement. D. Escape. Answer: D. Escape. This question is a classic scenario for identifying the function of a behavior. The key clues are present a difficult academic task, the antecedent, and results in you removing the task. The consequence, the behavior, screaming, is followed by the removal of something the client likely finds unpleasant, the difficult task. When a behavior is reinforced because it allows the person to escape or avoid something they don't want, the function is escape. Attention would be getting noticed, access would be getting a toy, and automatic reinforcement feels good internally. Since the behavior results in getting away from the task, it's escape. If doing the behavior helps them bail out of something tough, it's likely escape. Question 3. A client's parent tells you they are unhappy with the rate of progress and asks you to try a different teaching method they read about online, which is not part of the current behavior plan. What should you do? A. Explain to the parent that you must follow the plan your supervisor wrote. B. Tell the parent you will try the new method during your next session. C. Recommend the parent discuss the method with your supervisor. D. Try the method but collect extra data to show your supervisor. Answer: C. Recommend the parent discuss the method with your supervisor. This question puts you in a common but tricky ethical situation involving parents requesting changes. While you must follow your supervisor's plan and explaining this, option A is partly correct. Your primary responsibility when faced with a request to change the plan itself is to direct that request to your supervisor. You, as an RBT, are not authorized to modify the plan or implement methods not approved by your supervisor. Trying the method, B or D, goes outside your scope and could be harmful or ineffective. Politely suggesting they talk to the BCBA is the correct ethical and professional step, ensuring the clinical decisions are made by the qualified professional. Your supervisor is the expert who designs and approves the methods, so direct parent requests about the plan to them. Question 4. A teacher tells you that every time she asks a student to sit down, which she usually does, another student laughs, and now the student she asked to sit is less likely to sit down in the future. From the perspective of the student being asked to sit, what effect did the other student's laughter likely have on his sitting behavior? A. Positive reinforcement. B. Negative reinforcement. C. Positive punishment. D. Negative punishment. Answer: C. Positive punishment. This is a tricky punishment question because the consequence comes from another person, not you directly. The student was asked to sit. Antecedent: he sat down. Behavior: the other student laughed. Something added to the situation, positive. And this made the sitting behavior less likely in the future. Punishment: the laughter, even though not intended as punishment, acted as a positive punisher for the sitting behavior. Positive reinforcement would increase the behavior. Negative reinforcement would increase behavior by removing something unpleasant, and negative punishment would decrease behavior by removing something pleasant. The laughter was added and decreased the behavior, making it positive punishment for the sitting student. Consequences are defined by their effect on future behavior, regardless of intent or who delivers them. Question 5. You need to measure a behavior that occurs constantly throughout the session, like hand flapping or humming. Which measurement method would likely be the most practical and still give useful information for this type of behavior? A. Frequency. B. Duration. C. Partial interval recording. D. Latency. Answer: C. Partial interval recording. This question challenges you to pick a data method suitable for a continuous or very high frequency behavior. Frequency would mean counting potentially thousands of flaps or every hum, which is impractical. Duration might be useful, but if it's happening most of the time, stating the total duration doesn't capture variability well across intervals. Latency is about the time to start a behavior after a cue, not for behaviors already happening. Partial interval recording, where you mark if the behavior happens at all during short intervals, is a practical way to get an estimate of how often a high rate or continuous behavior is occurring without needing constant monitoring. It gives you a percentage of intervals the behavior occurred in. For behaviors that are hard to count or time accurately because they happen so much, interval recording can be a good estimate. Question 6. A client hasn't had access to their favorite iPad game all day. When you hold up the iPad, they immediately say, "iPad, please," and you give it to them. The iPad being unavailable all day acted as what? A. Discriminative stimulus, SD. B. Conditioned reinforcer. C. Motivating operation, MO. D. Consequence. Answer: C. Motivating operation, MO. This question requires you to distinguish between an EST and an MO. The iPad being held up is the EST. Its signal saying, "iPad please," might get reinforced. But the reason the iPad was such a strong reinforcer, and the client was so likely to ask for it, relates to their motivation. Not having access all day made the iPad more valuable as a reinforcer and increased the likelihood of behaviors that got the iPad in the past. This change in the effectiveness of the reinforcer and the frequency of related behavior is the job of the motivating operation. MO, specifically in establishing operation, EO, because it increases the value. This as it tells you how to get the reinforcement. The MO makes you want the reinforcement in the first place. Being without something you like makes you want it more. That's the MO at play. Question 7. You are teaching a client to greet people, say hello. The current step is that you say, "Hi, client's name," and they say hello with a little help. A gentle nudge/gesture from you. What type of prompting is likely being used here? A. Full physical. B. Verbal. C. Gestural. D. Model. Answer: C. Gestural. This question asks you to identify a specific prompt type based on a description. The scenario says you're giving them a gentle nudge/gesture. While a nudge could be debated as light physical, the common usage for a non-instructive physical cue or a point/hand movement is gestural. Full physical would be guiding their mouth or body. Verbal would be giving the word hello. Model would be you saying hello first for them to copy. A gentle nudge or gesture is guiding their attention or movement without full physical contact or a verbal cue of the answer. A quick hand movement or point is often the easiest way to give a hint. That's a gestural prompt. Question 8. Your supervisor asks you to measure how long it takes from the moment you say "clean up time" until the client picks up the first toy. Which dimension of behavior are you measuring? A. Frequency. B. Duration. C. Latency. D. Interresponse time, IRT. Answer C. Latency. This question asks about a specific time-based measurement. The key phrase is how long it takes from the moment you say Q until the client picks up the first toy, start of behavior. This measures the time between the instruction or stimulus and the beginning of the response. That specific measurement is called latency. Frequency is counting. Duration is how long the behavior lasts from start to finish, and interresponse time, IRT, is the time between two instances of the same behavior. Measuring the gap between the instruction and when the action starts is always latency. Think of the lag time. That's latency. Question 9. A client rarely says the word bubble. You decide to reinforce them anytime they make a buh sound, then only when they say buh, and finally only when they say bubble. This process is called A. Chaining, B. Discrimination training, C. Shaping, D. Imitation training. Answer C. Shaping. This question describes building a new behavior gradually by reinforcing closer and closer attempts. The scenario involves reinforcing any time they make a buh sound, then only when they say buh, and finally only when they say bubble. You are reinforcing successive approximations of the target behavior, saying bubble. This is the definition of shaping. Chaining links together multiple steps. Discrimination training teaches the difference between stimuli. Imitation training teaches copying. Shaping is like sculpting a behavior. You start with a rough block and reinforce little improvements until you get the final desired form. Question 10. You are teaching a client to get dressed. You have a list of steps. Put on socks, put on pants, put on shirt, etc. You prompt the client through all the steps from the beginning to the end of the list in each teaching trial. This is an example of using A. Task analysis with backward chaining. B. Task analysis with forward chaining. C. Task analysis with total task chaining. D. Shaping procedure. Answer C. Task analysis with total task chaining. This question describes applying a teaching method to a multi-step task, a task analysis. The key phrase is prompt the client through all the steps from the beginning to the end of the list in each teaching trial. This means you are requiring the client to attempt every single step in the task analysis during each practice attempt, prompting as needed, and reinforcing completion of the whole task or significant progress through it. This is total task chaining. Backward chaining starts from the last step, and forward chaining starts from the first, teaching one step at a time before moving to the next. Shaping is for single behaviors, not multi-step tasks. When you try all the steps every time, you're using total task chaining. Question 11. Your client's sibling asks you specific questions about the client's behavior goals and progress during a shared play session. What should you do? A. Answer their questions briefly to be polite. B. Tell the sibling you cannot discuss the client's private information. C. Explain that the sibling needs to ask their parents or your supervisor. D. Change the subject to a different topic immediately. Answer B. Tell the sibling you cannot discuss the client's private information. This question tests your understanding of confidentiality in a tricky family context. While it might seem harmless to talk to a sibling, you cannot discuss confidential client information, like their behavior goals and progress, with anyone not authorized, and siblings are generally not authorized parties for clinical details unless specifically included in a team meeting with parental consent. Options is a direct violation of confidentiality. Options C and D are okay, but option B is the most direct and correct professional response regarding why you cannot share the information. It's polite yet firm about professional boundaries and privacy. It might feel awkward, but you have to protect the client's privacy. Simply state that you can't share private information. Question 12. After you implement an extinction procedure, stopping reinforcement for a behavior, You notice the behavior temporarily increases in frequency or intensity before it starts to decrease. This temporary increase is called A. Spontaneous recovery, B. Punishment rebound, C. Extinction burst, D. Behavioral momentum. Answer: C. Extinction burst. This question asks you to identify a common and predictable phenomenon that happens when you first stop reinforcing a behavior. When the usual payoff for a behavior is suddenly gone, the individual might try harder or do the behavior more intensely for a while before giving up, like pressing an elevator button repeatedly if it doesn't come right away. This temporary increase in frequency, intensity, or duration, and sometimes new behaviors, right after extinction starts is called an extinction burst. Spontaneous recovery is when the behavior reappears later after it seemed extinguished. Punishment rebound isn't a standard ABA term for this. Behavioral momentum relates to continuing a task after easy ones. An extinction burst is a sign that your extinction procedure is actually working, so don't give up. Question 13. Your supervisor asks you to help them conduct a functional analysis by implementing specific conditions as they direct you. Which part of the functional analysis process is most within your scope of practice under supervision? A. Designing the different test conditions. B. Interpreting the results to determine function. C. Directly implementing the test conditions as instructed. D. Writing the functional behavior assessment report. Answer: C. Directly implementing the test conditions as instructed. This question highlights the limits of an RBT's role in complex procedures like functional analyses, a specific type of FBA. RBTs do not design assessments. A. Interpret data to determine function. B. Or write reports. D. These are responsibilities of the BCBA or BCAB as supervisor. An RBT's role in a functional analysis under close supervision is to carry out the specific prescribed instructions for each test condition, like providing attention for a behavior in one condition, withholding it in another, and collect the data accurately. You are the one performing the actions exactly as the supervisor tells you. Your job is to implement the plan or procedure designed by your supervisor. Question 14. A client usually screams when asked to transition from playing to schoolwork. You start letting the client finish just one more turn of their game, removing the non-preferred activity now condition slightly later. If they transition calmly, this results in them transitioning calmly more often. What principle is being used? A. Positive reinforcement. B. Negative reinforcement. C. Positive punishment. D. Negative punishment. Answer: B. Negative reinforcement. This is a tricky one because it involves removing something unpleasant, the immediate start of schoolwork/end of play. The behavior you want to increase is transitioning calmly. The consequence is that the unpleasant thing, having to stop playing immediately, is delayed or modified. The behavior, calm transition, leads to the removal of an aversive condition, or delaying it, which is a form of removal of the immediate demand. Since the calm transition is increasing because it leads to the removal of something unpleasant, it's negative reinforcement. Positive reinforcement would be adding something pleasant after the calm transition, like praise. This is tough because it looks like a reward, but the mechanism is about getting out of or away from the demand. Getting out of something you dislike makes that getting out behavior stronger. That's negative reinforcement. Question 15. You are teaching a client to identify the color blue. You hold up a blue card and say, "Touch blue." The client touches the blue card and you reinforce them. Later, you hold up a blue card and a red card and say, "Touch blue." The client touches the blue card and you reinforce them. What is the instruction "touch blue" in these examples? A. The reinforcer. B. The consequence. C. The behavior. D. The discriminative stimulus. SD. Answer: D. The discriminative stimulus. SD. This question again tests the ABC model, specifically identifying the antecedent. The instruction touch blue is the cue given before the client's behavior, touching the card. It signals which response is correct and will be reinforced. It's the stimulus that discriminates the situation where touching blue is the expected and reinforced behavior. Reinforcer and consequence happen after the behavior. The behavior is touching the card. The instruction sets the occasion for the behavior to occur and be reinforced, making it the discriminative stimulus, SD. The est is the signal that tells you, do this now. Question 16. You are working with a new client who is hesitant to engage with you. Your supervisor recommends spending the first few sessions simply playing with them, providing toys they like, and talking positively without making any demands. The goal is likely to A. Conduct a functional analysis. B. Build rapport and pair yourself with reinforcement. C. Assess challenging behaviors. D. Implement extinction procedures. Answer B. Build rapport and pair yourself with reinforcement. This question describes a crucial first step in working with a new client, often called pairing. The goal is to become associated with pleasant things, toys, fun activities, positive attention, so that your presence becomes reinforcing to the client. This helps build a positive relationship, rapport, and makes the client want to be with you, which is essential for effective teaching and behavior change. This is not about analyzing behavior, or C, or reducing behavior, D. You're essentially becoming a signal for good things. When you're paired with fun stuff, you become reinforcing too. Question 17. On average, a client receives a token for every 5 correct responses, but the exact number of responses required changes each time. Sometimes 3, sometimes 7, sometimes 5, etc. This is an example of what type of reinforcement schedule? A. Fixed ratio, FR. B. Variable ratio, VR. C. Fixed interval, FI. D. Variable interval, VI. Answer B. Variable ratio, VR. This question is tricky because it gives you a number, 5, but specifies that it's an average and changes. This points to a variable schedule. The reinforcement is based on the number of responses for every 5 correct responses, which makes it a ratio schedule. Combining variable and ratio gives you variable ratio, VR. Fixed ratio, FR, would be exactly 5 responses every time. Interval schedules are based on time. When the number of responses needed changes unpredictably, it's a variable ratio. Think of VR for varies by response number. Question 18. You notice that the data sheet for a particular behavior has been filled out with the same number of instances for the past 5 sessions, even though you saw the behavior occur much more frequently in today's session. What is the most appropriate action? A. Use the previous data point to fill out today's data sheet for consistency. B. Discuss your observation and today's data with your supervisor. C. Assume the previous RBTs were incorrect and discard the old data. D. Continue collecting data as instructed, but don't mention the discrepancy. Answer B. Discuss your observation and today's data with your supervisor. This question addresses data integrity and professional responsibility. Noticing a discrepancy in data suggests a potential issue, either in how data is being collected, defined, or recorded. You should never falsify data or assume others were wrong without investigation. Or C. Ignoring the issue, D, is unethical as it provides inaccurate information to the supervisor designing the plan. The most appropriate step is to bring this observation and your data from today to your supervisor. They can help troubleshoot why the data looks inconsistent, example definition issue, training need, error in recording, and ensure data accuracy moving forward. Good data is crucial, so if something looks off, tell your supervisor so they can help fix it. Question 19. A client sees a picture of a dog and says, "Doggy." They do not want the picture, they are just labeling it. What type of verbal behavior is this likely an example of? A. mand. B. Tact. C. Echoic. D. Intraverbal. Answer. B. Tact. This question asks you to identify a specific type of verbal behavior. The key clues are sees a picture of a dog, a nonverbal stimulus in the environment, and says doggy, the verbal response, with the context that they do not want the picture, so it's not a request/mand. When a client labels or names something they see, hear, smell, taste, or feel in the environment, it's called a tact. A mand is a request. An echoic is repeating something someone else said. An intraverbal is responding to language with different language, like answering a question or filling in a blank. Labeling something you perceive is a tact. Think tact equals contact with the environment through your senses. Question 20. A client engages in hand flapping. You decide to provide reinforcement, praise, and a quick tickle, only when they have their hands still in their lap for at least 30 seconds. You do not reinforce the hand flapping. This is an example of a differential reinforcement of other behavior. DRO. B. Differential reinforcement of incompatible behavior. DRI. C. Differential reinforcement of alternative behavior. DRA. D. Negative punishment. Answer. A. Differential reinforcement of other behavior. DRO. This question describes a differential reinforcement procedure. You are reinforcing the absence of the target behavior, hand flapping, for a specific period, at least 30 seconds, by reinforcing whatever else they are doing, having hands still in lap. As long as the hand flapping doesn't occur, this is differential reinforcement of other behavior. DRO. You reinforce any other behavior as long as the target behavior doesn't happen for a set time. DRI reinforces a behavior that cannot happen at the same time as the problem behavior, like hands folded vis, flapping. DRI reinforces a specific alternative behavior. Negative punishment removes something pleasant. You're reinforcing the lack of the problem behavior during a time period. That's DRO. Question 21. Your supervisor gives you feedback on your prompting strategy, suggesting you use less intrusive prompts sooner. You feel you need to use more intrusive prompts because the client isn't responding otherwise. What is the best way to handle this? A. Continue using the more intrusive prompts you think are needed. B. Tell your supervisor you disagree and explain why based on your experience. C. Ask your supervisor if you can demonstrate your prompting strategy and discuss their feedback further. D. Implement the less intrusive prompts, but if the client doesn't respond, revert to more intrusive prompts without telling your supervisor. Answer. C. Ask your supervisor if you can demonstrate your prompting strategy and discuss their feedback further. This question presents a situation where you receive feedback you initially disagree with, while you must ultimately follow your supervisor's direction, avoiding A and D, simply stating your disagreement without seeking understanding. B isn't the most collaborative or professional approach. The best approach is to engage in a professional discussion. Ask clarifying questions, explain what you've observed that led you to your current strategy, and ask if you can show them or practice with them. This shows you are receptive to feedback, value their expertise, and are seeking to understand and implement their guidance effectively. Open communication and collaboration with your supervisor are key. Question 22. You are documenting a session. Which of the following should you avoid including in your session notes? A. Objective data points collected example frequency counts, percentages. B. A description of a challenging behavior occurrence in measurable terms. C. Subjective statements about the client's mood or internal feelings. D. Information about what skills were targeted and the client's response. Answer. C. Subjective statements about the client's mood or internal feelings. This question asks about what information is appropriate for professional documentation. Session notes should be factual, objective, and based on observable events and data. Objective data. A. measurable descriptions of behavior. B. And details about programs and responses. D. Are all appropriate and necessary. Subjective statements about feelings. Client seemed sad. He was just trying to get attention. Are interpretations, not objective facts, and should be avoided in professional documentation. Stick to what you can see and measure, not what you think is happening inside the client's head. Report the facts, not your feelings or guesses about theirs. Question 23. You conducted a paired stimulus preference assessment, and the results showed that bubbles were chosen 80% of the time, cars 50%, and Play-Doh 20%. How should you use this information? A. Use bubbles as a reinforcer, since they were chosen most often. B. Use Play-Doh as a reinforcer, since it was chosen least often. C. Use all three items interchangeably as reinforcers. D. Do not use any of these items, as none were chosen 100% of the time. Answer. A. Use bubbles as a reinforcer, since they were chosen most often. This question tests how to interpret results from a preference assessment for intervention. The purpose of a preference assessment is to identify items or activities that are likely to function as reinforcers because the client prefers them. Items chosen more often in a structured assessment, like paired stimulus, are higher preference and therefore more likely to be effective reinforcers. You should start by trying the highest preference item, bubbles, chosen 80%, as a reinforcer first. Lower preference items, Play-Doh, are less likely to work. Using all interchangeably might be okay later, but you start with the best bet. You don't need 100% preference for an item to be a reinforcer. Any item the client prefers significantly over others is a good candidate. Go with the winner from the assessment. Question 24. When defining a behavior targeted for decrease, the definition should include A. What the behavior looks and sounds like, topography. B. The likely function of the behavior. C. How often the behavior occurs. D. Your hypothesis about why the behavior happens. Answer. A. What the behavior looks and sounds like, topography. This question focuses on the essential components of a good behavioral definition, especially for behaviors you want to reduce. A complete behavioral definition must be objective and observable, clearly describing the form or topography of the behavior. What it looks and sounds like, example, hitting includes open hand contact or closed fist contact with any person's body. The likely function, B. Frequency, C. And hypotheses, D. Are important parts of the overall behavior plan and assessment, but they are not part of the behavioral definition itself. The definition is just a clear description of the action. Define the behavior by what you can see and hear. Question 25. You are playing a game with a client. When it's their turn, you say your turn. This signals they should take their turn. Taking their turn then results in them getting to roll the dice, which they like. What is the most likely function of the behavior taking their turn in this context? A. Attention. B. Access to tangibles/activities. C. Escape. D. Automatic reinforcement. Answer. B. Access to tangibles/activities. This question asks about the function of a behavior based on a specific scenario. The behavior is taking their turn. The consequence is getting to roll the dice, which they like. Rolling the dice is an activity or part of the game, a tangible/activity. Since the behavior of taking their turn is followed by access to a preferred activity/tangible, and this makes them more likely to take their turn in the future, the function is accessing that preferred item or activity. Attention might be present, but the core payoff directly tied to the behavior is getting to do the fun part of the game. If doing the behavior gets them access to something fun or desired, the function is likely access to tangibles/activities.